Let's start out by talking about what is information security. Well, it's anything you're going to do to protect your systems or your data. You want to protect it from unauthorized access or use, disclosure, disruption, modification, or even destruction. And it's based on a principle called the CIA triad. That stands for confidentiality, integrity, and availability. Now, what does this mean? Confidentiality means only authorized parties, users or processes or other systems, can access the data or system. Integrity means that if you do access it, you don't have unauthorized modifications or deletions. And quite honestly, you cannot have integrity without confidentiality. Availability means, hey, you haven't locked this thing down so far that we can't use it. You know, the problem, of course, with security is that it's always in a tug of war. You've got security versus functionality, security versus ease of use, security versus learning curve. You got to have a balance. You've got to have a balance between security, functionality, and usability. These attributes are interlocked, and security is always going to be trying to take away from everything else. The more you increase security, the less you can do the other things. You're going to have to find the acceptable balance between the three of these. When you apply security, don't just put security on one thing or in one area. Always do it in layers. We call that defense in depth. If you have multiple layers of security, including around the perimeter, on the network, at the particular servers or endpoints, on the application, on users, on the data itself, anytime you might have a little hole or gap in one of these layers, the other layers will help cover it. And what will happen is if you have strong security on multiple layers, it shrinks the overall risk. It shrinks the exposure. Now, there are three types of active defense. You need to know these. One is annoyance. We're just going to annoy the attacker. We'll waste their time. We'll make them spend time on a honeypot or lead them down a false trail. Make it easy for them to be spotted, easy for us to detect them. Another one is attribution. We're going to identify who you are. We're going to trace you back to your source or your location or even you, the individual. And then the last one, this one you have to be really careful about. This is attack. You're going to hack back. Now, it's controversial, it's risky, and it could be illegal. So some attacker attacks you, you attack them back, you delete their data, you take revenge. You really need to be careful because you'll make them angry and they'll hit you even harder. So you'd really better know what you're doing. And it's a good strategy just to not do the last one. Don't do the hack back part. Don't do the attack part. Here is some essential terminology that you are going to need to know. Hack value. What is the perceived value or worth of the target to the attacker? Not to you, to the attacker. Why do they want to go after it? Vulnerability. This is any weakness or flaw in your system. You'll have lots of vulnerabilities for which there is no exploit. Threat. This is anything or anybody that could potentially violate the security of your system, your organization, your data. Exploit. This is an actual way, an actual mechanism to take advantage of a vulnerability. Payload. A payload is the malicious, damaging part of an exploit. You'll have an exploit, and an exploit is really kind of like kicking in the door, but the payload is throwing in the grenade. The payload is the part that does the real damage. Zero-day attack, also known as O-day attack. This is an attack that no one has seen before. Some hacker has figured out some way to break in, and there's no patch, not yet. Zero-day attack, also known as O-Day. This is when there's an attack and no one has seen it before. There's no countermeasure. There's no patch for this. Many attacks start out as 0-day. Then the vendor says, oh, here's some kind of exploit. We got to figure out a patch. Daisy chaining or pivoting. This is when you take one first attack and you use it as a launch point to start another attack. So like maybe we'll break into the web server in the DMZ, but we'll use it to further attack internal computers. When you daisy chain attacks, you do one after another, after another, after another. Often they are dependent on the one before. Pivoting is basically the same concept. I will attack one thing, and from that thing that I attacked right there, that I broke into right there, I will then launch an attack into something else. And then here's something that we are all familiar with now, and that is doxing. And that is maliciously putting out someone's personal information out on the internet or publish it somehow so that you can cause damage to the person. You can harm them. We also have non-repudiation. Non-repudiation means you cannot deny that you did that. We have to be able to prove they did it, though. So you either logged in, or we've got your fingerprint, or you digitally signed something. You can't say it wasn't me. Control. Now, this is a broad term. It means anything that is going to reduce risk that you put in place, that you deliberately put in place. It could be policy, process, procedure, technology, the way you do things. It doesn't have to be technical in nature. Mitigation. This is any action we will take or anything we'll set in place to reduce the consequences, to minimize the damage in case something actually happens. We need to mitigate this. Somebody broke in. We need to mitigate this. And hopefully we'll have mitigation in place even before they break in. Accountability. We're going to hold people responsible for their actions. And this is where non-repudiation comes in. Hey, you digitally signed that document. You sent it. You can't say it wasn't you. We're going to hold you liable. Authenticity. This is proving that something is legitimate or real. We have proven that. This is the original. Enterprise Information Security Architecture, EISA. This is a process. We're going to institute a complete information security solution that covers the whole enterprise, covers every aspect of our information security, all of our processes, our people, our technology, our data, our systems. This is what EISA is all about. There are 3 types of security controls: physical, administrative, and technical. Now, let's see the difference. Physical is like it sounds. You can touch it. It's tangible. It's usually mechanical in nature. It's designed to deter unauthorized access into rooms or to equipment or to documents or data. It will include the obvious things: guards, lights, cameras, motion detectors, walls and fences, bollards, those concrete or steel pillars that prevent someone from ramming their truck into the front door of a building. Man traps, a double door system. You go through one, you have to wait before you can go through the next. Turnstiles, which they could rotate this way, they could open this way or this way, but they allow people in one at a time. Locks and alarms, or even tools to shred or dispose of documents, hard drives, or other storage media. Then we have something called administrative. Now, administrative by itself is not going to protect anything. You have to enforce it. These are things set by management, policies and procedures, best practices. This is how you do it, folks, to minimize our risk. So it would include training and policies, procedures, guidelines, bug bounties, or doing security auditing. The last one is technical. That's what, as system administrators, we would typically think of. This is any technology we would use to reduce risk. So intrusion detection, intrusion prevention, firewalls, antivirus, encryption, authentication, access control. These are technical security controls. There's one more way of looking at security controls. You know, you can have an attack and maybe they get in and they do some damage. You have procedural controls, administrative, you have technical controls, you have physical controls. But in that whole series of events, where does the control fall in that whole timeline? What does it do to help? The first type would be preventive. Just make it really hard or impossible for someone to actually carry out their threat. We want to keep errors or irregularities from occurring in the first place. Most security controls strive to be preventive. So these would be fences and gates and locks, authentication, encryption, access control, segregation of duties, employee screening and training. Try to try to prevent it from the beginning. Then there's detective. If something is happening, we want to find out as early as possible. We want to detect it as soon as possible. So we want to detect errors, irregularities, and intrusions that have already occurred or are in the process of occurring. And we assure then that we can correct them as promptly as possible. So we want to have audits or intrusion detection or cameras or motion sensors, antivirus, mandatory vacations, job rotation. Then there's deterrent. We're trying to discourage people. We'll have warning signs or good lighting or high fences or guards or dogs or log-on banners. Warning, this is an official system. We just want people to look at it and be kind of discouraged. Preventive would flat out stop them or make it really hard. Deterrent would be like, I'm not even going to try. Then we have mitigating or recovery controls. These are, let's minimize the impact. We either have a break-in in progress or it just happened. So isolate the system, take it off the network, turn it off, or it got broken into, got damaged, fix it as soon as possible. Restore service, restore operations, or a fire broke out, suppress it so it doesn't go any farther. And then you've got corrective or compensating controls. These are ones that you put to cover gaps. Yeah, this security covers almost everything, but there's this one little gap, so we're going to put in one more thing to try to cover that one gap. It's an alternative fix. It tries to provide some equivalent protection, to at least for that one gap. And you might have to sacrifice some conveniences to get the overall desired result. Here's a very real-life example, a medical instrument that uses an older operating system that the vendor no longer puts out patches for, but we're not going to upgrade the operating system because that means we would have to completely redo the code that runs whatever that instrument is. I've seen it in the field many times. I have a buddy who works, or who was the CIO of a small hospital, and she said, yeah, we've got plenty of medical devices that still run Server 2003. I have seen like optical devices that run Windows 7. And the vendors have said, you know what, we're just not going to do anything about it because we don't want to disrupt the functionality. So, okay, if that's the case, then just make sure the device isn't on the network, okay? Make sure it's physically secured. If you have to have it running with those vulnerabilities so it provides its primary clinical functions, then disconnect it from some unauthorized access. That would be a compensating or correcting control. We also have this concept of network security zoning. This means your network may have some areas that are more secure or should be more secure than others. We can manage different levels of security depending upon what's in that part of the network, or what kind of data it contains, or what kind of people work in it. You would set up clear security boundaries. Firewalls, access control lists on switches, routers, these would be the common mechanisms to set up security boundaries between different network zones. Here are some examples. The internet zone would be uncontrolled. It's outside the organization, and yet it does touch our network. Of course it does. The internet DMZ zone, this is controlled. We have 2 firewalls and we put public-facing servers there. So this would be the defense between the internet and our internal network. Then you have the production zone. This would be restricted. We would strictly control access. You have the intranet zone, where maybe administrative people work. It too would be controlled, but no extreme restrictions, as opposed to a production area like manufacturing, where you really want to make sure that no one's breaking into the manufacturing process. Or the management zone. This is a secured zone. There are strict policies. I've used management zones a lot, and sometimes they overlay on top of the regular intranet. We use like maybe a VLAN or something like that. So management of the various network devices, while it will travel along the same physical cabling, it's in a different VLAN, so you can't just simply get into it. You have to actually route through and get through some access control lists. These are examples of network security zoning. And here's a diagram that does it kind of simply. Here's our firewall. It has 3 interfaces. On the outside, we have the untrusted public internet zone. We have another interface that's specifically for the DMZ. These servers would be like a web server or an email relay that are exposed to the internet. And then we have the inside trusted private area, which is a lot more protected. Identity and access management is the who can access what. You hear about IAM. It has these 4 basic parts: authentication, authorization, user management, and managing the users in a central repository, such as a directory service like Active Directory. Identification starts out with, who are you? Just identifying someone. We identify with your badge. It doesn't necessarily prove it's you. I mean, we've seen these movies where, someone gets a badge and a picture, and they like cut out something with a razor, put their own picture on a badge. Okay. But it's meant to identify you, not necessarily for sure prove it's you, but be reasonable. So that's identification. Your name, your picture, your username, your ID number, your employee number, your social security, your badge number. These would be examples of identification. You can have identification also applied to non-humans, like devices and applications and services. They would have names or IP addresses or descriptions. Then there's authentication. Now, prove that it's you. Put in a username and password. Get something on your phone, like a multi-factor authentication, and click, yeah, this is me. Tap, this is me. Or do some kind of biometric scan. Or put in a smart card in a reader and then also provide a PIN. This is proving it's you, above and beyond just identification. And very often, badges will be both identification and used for authentication, because they'll be smart cards and they'll also have a picture. When you authenticate somebody, we have something called authentication factors. The easiest one is something you know, a PIN or a password. Something you have, a smart card or certificate, an authenticating app on your phone. Something you are, like your fingerprint, finger scan, iris scan, facial recognition. Something you do, like the way you walk, the way you sign something, the way you type. These are all authentication factors. And there's also one more, somewhere you are, geolocation. Now that's not real strong, but you use it along with other things. Like 5 minutes ago, you were in North America, and now 5 minutes later, you're in East Asia? I don't think so. So somewhere you are. Usually proved with something you would have like your phone. Multi-factor authentication will use 2 or more factors, but not from the same category. So I would have a smart card and a PIN. Once we've authenticated someone, we have the concept of authorization. You are now allowed to do something. You got to prove your identity first, and now what can you do? It is applied after someone successfully authenticates. We would apply permissions to resources, folders, files, databases, email, a computer. We would assign rights and privileges. We would assign those at a system level. Strategies for secure authorization, first of all, give people least privilege, meaning give them the minimal level of access or permissions, just enough to do their job. Don't make everyone a domain admin, okay? Separation of duties. One person can write checks, another person can approve purchases. Don't have somebody who approves the purchase also be the person who writes the check. We want to prevent conflict of interest. We want to reduce the risk of unauthorized access and fraud. We want to identify and mitigate control failures like security breaches and information theft and circumvention of security controls. Accounting is the ability to trace an action to an entity, and we usually use a log to do that. Prove who or what performed an action on what when. So we'll log whatever they do so that we can check it. We can audit later. We can make sure that they're in compliance with whatever regulation or company policy, and we'll also have it for later reference. Now we have different kinds of access control. There's mandatory and discretionary, and there are a few others. In mandatory access control, we use this in government and in the military. You have people called subjects. You have things, resources, called objects. Every object is given a sensitivity label, like it's unclassified or confidential, or sensitive but unclassified, secret, top secret. And then the subjects, which are usually people, but they could also be processes and systems, they're given a clearance level. The subject will undergo extensive investigation, if they're a person or an entity, to determine what clearance we're going to grant them. Are we going to give them public trust, secret, or top secret? You can't just go and change any of these things arbitrarily. If I have a secret level clearance, I can access things at secret level or below. I can't go up to top secret. If I only have a public trust, then I can access sensitive but unclassified, but I can't go up to secret. And I can't just bribe someone and say, hey, change this, because the process is so lengthy and so thorough and so involved. No one can just arbitrarily change something. They don't even have the administrative control to do it. So subjects can access objects at or below their clearance level. Top secret can also be what we call compartmentalized, and it would be based on a need to know. Yeah, you have top secret, but that doesn't mean you can go read the presidential daily briefings, okay? So it depends upon just how sensitive the information is. Here would be an example of mandatory access control. I have all these sensitivity labels on resources, devices, removable hard drive systems, and then I have different people with different clearance levels. So here's someone with public trust, and they go through an extensive background check, but they can access sensitive but unclassified or anything below. Here's someone with a secret clearance, so they can access secret or below. Here's someone with a top secret clearance, so they can access TS or below. And of course, then you have the general public, and they can access just the unclassified stuff that we would just publish on a website for anyone to take a look at. Now we have something called discretionary access control, or DAC. This is where a system owner or a resource owner can pick and choose who has what level. So here I have some kind of resource or system owner. I've got somebody who owns something right here. And they say which users or groups can access the thing that they own, the data. Usually it's the data, but could be a system too. Most operating systems are DAC. The owner of the data or the system defines access at their discretion. It's flexible, but it's weak because, hey, I'll give you a chocolate bar if you let me get into this thing. Or, hey, can you let me have access to this thing? And they don't think about it. Oh, sure, yeah. Examples of the permissions they could grant would be read, write, execute, delete, just list the contents of a folder, or even take ownership. Now we have something called role-based access control, or RBAC. This is where we don't grant permissions based on an individual, but based on what they do. What's your job? What's your role? What's your function in the organization? So we will grant permissions to the role, not to individual users, because users can come and go out of the role. So we can add users to and from the role, but the permissions stay constant. In Windows and in many operating systems, groups are used to represent the role. Here's an example of RBAC. I have these various users. These users belong to different groups. So like this user belongs to group C. This user belongs to group B. Both of these users belong to group F. And then what I do is I grant permissions on whatever it is to a specific group. So if I grant a permission to group A, none of these people have that permission unless the admin puts them in group A. Okay, I'll put you in group A right now, and then when you go back to whatever you're normally doing, I'll take you out of the group. So that's the idea of role-based access control. It's actually a recommended mechanism for assigning permissions to resources. Finally, we have something called rule-based access control, or rule back. This is where in the moment, whatever you're doing or whatever you are, whoever you are, do you meet a rule? And if you meet the rule, if you match the rule, then are you permitted or denied to do whatever you're trying to do? This is most commonly used in firewalls and packet filtering routers. So here would be an example. I have all these rules, and they'll be tried one at a time in order. I mean, there are some exceptions, some vendors, but in most cases, they're just tried one after another. So in comes a packet, and the firewall is going to check the packet. You will be allowed to go through if you're using IP, coming from anywhere, but going to a specific destination using a specific port, port 80. If you meet that rule, go on your merry way. Go on through. If you don't meet that rule, let's try the next rule. Okay, you can go if you're using IP coming from anywhere, going to a specific server using port 443. You meet it? Go ahead. If you don't, let's try the next rule. All right, you can go through if you're using UDP coming from anywhere, going to this particular different server using this particular UDP port. Yes? No? Yes? Go ahead. No? Go to the next rule. Now, the first three rules were allows. The next one's going to be a deny, but only if we match. So if you're using TCP, going anywhere from any place, trying to use TCP 53, we're going to drop you right there. And at that point, you don't go any farther. But maybe your packet isn't that. So, okay, try the next rule. Well, if you use IP, any source, any destination, port 53, well, maybe you don't even match that. The last rule is, I don't care who you are or where you're going, you're denied. So this is the idea of rule-back access control. It may seem like a lot, but it's actually very fast. It has really good performance. So this is our overview of information security. Now let's go on to the next topic.